So I want to welcome everybody to our SKUFood webinar today, working with food retailers during volatile times. And first, want to definitely say thank you for being here. I appreciate right now that everybody in the food industry is incredibly busy. There's an awful lot of things going on. So I do appreciate you taking time to be here with us today, and look forward to sharing some insights with you into how we can try to work through some of the challenges in front of us. And in Canada, our consumers in this market are so used to just going into big beautiful stores. This is a Sobeys, one of the new stores that just opened in Nova Scotia, and they're used to just finding everything they need whenever they want it. And obviously, since the sort of 13th, 12th of March in Canada, some parts of Canada maybe a little bit earlier than that, we haven't found that in our food stores, and it's been a real challenge for industry to respond. And so today I want to share some insights with you into how you can respond in the near term, and then also we'll look out a little further and try to get a handle a little bit about what's going on, and what you can do to try to secure your place in the industry, and also develop those relationships with your customers, because the reality is that during tough times is when some of the best relationships are developed. So we'll cover off the short term and the long term as we go through things today. And when I was putting the content together for this, I was sort of reminded of my days back in the store. And I started working in the store sort of in the early 80s, and it was back in the days when we packed the groceries in paper bags, which are now back in vogue, and carried them out to stores, or carried them out to the car for people. And just how different that shopping environment has become in the last 2 weeks. It's incredible to see the change in how retailers have had to respond to respect the physical distance requirements that they're being asked to do, and also to protect their employees, and try to give them a safe working environment to go to work in. So it's incredible how the store in the last few weeks has changed. And it got me thinking back to my days in the store. And then I started to reflect on my time at Loblaw. And one of the most challenging times while I was at Loblaw for 19 years was 9/11. And that was definitely a period of uncertainty in the food industry, where we really paused, and there were a lot of questions asked of us in terms of the security and safety of the food supply. And it really forced us to question a lot of our practices and that kind of thing. And it was definitely a pause. But now I think that this impact of this coronavirus that everybody is dealing with is really more than a pause. It's really, in some respects, it could be a stop in some cases. So it's a bigger issue, and one that we have to figure out how to tackle. Now, I know a lot of you are working at home right now, and I just wanted to share some tips. So I've been working at home for 12 years since I finished my time at Loblaw, and I've been working with different producers and processors to help them understand customers better. And here's just sort of the top 5 that I would share with you, because it was definitely different for me, going from a big office where I had IT support and all those good things to working from home. So the first thing I would tell you is that you really need to find a dedicated space. And you might not be able to set up an office really quick because you've kind of been forced into this. But if you can just find a place where you don't have to put your things away and you can keep it out, it makes it much better to keep going back and forth to work. Treat the day like a work day. If you started at 8:30 in your office, then try to start at 8:30 now. Get dressed. I know that we talk about working from our pajamas is sort of a dream sometimes, but my experience has been, when I get dressed for work, I just felt more like I was working, and I had to be more professional. So I would tell you to do that. And you really got to restrict how much you're looking at the internet. It's such a temptation. It's out there, and it's easy to just kind of click over and look at things. And there's so much going on right now in the world, but maybe just try to schedule that as opposed to just doing it when you feel like it. And the last thing I would share is you really just have to embrace the technology. There is a lot of technology out there that will help you in terms of working from home, working remotely. So embrace it and make the most of it, because it is certainly possible to be just as effective. And if you ask me, more effective, because you can really focus on what's in front of you. So just a few tips for working at home. So now let's talk about what's going on in the food stores right now, and in terms of this sort of current situation they're in. And you've all been in the stores, I'm sure, and seen the shelf conditions that they're struggling with. And I can tell you from talking to people in retail that March 13th was the single busiest day that many of them have ever had, busier than any day leading up to Christmas or Easter. And when that happens, and they do, in some cases, maybe 2, 3, 4 times the expected volume, it just puts such a strain on the system. I mean, we just don't carry a lot of inventory in the food industry because of the cost and also freshness and code dates and all those different issues. And when consumers react differently, it just puts such a strain. So they're really trying to figure out how to get the stores back in shape. And I would say that it's been incredible and for those of you who are in the industry and understand kind of what has to happen behind the scenes to replenish and get warehouses and stores full of stock. It's been incredible. And I've heard some amazing stories in the last few weeks about people working together and really just trying to say, let's get the right thing happening for the consumer and get the stores full of food. And it's also important that we kind of, in the food industry, we have a responsibility to feed people because food is essential. But I also believe that it's a responsibility to keep these stores full or in stock, and not full right now, but in stock, because consumers panic when they don't see food. And so I think we all have that collective responsibility. So it's incredible to see the response from industry. So as you're figuring out what to do in this current situation, one of the most important things is to figure out where you fit in that level of priorities that your customers have. So if you're a top 10 item, then they're going to want to hear from you daily. If your product is something that perhaps is more of a luxury item or something that is more seasonal or that kind of thing, then you really have to respect your place in the priority list, because they're really trying to shore up the immediate needs. And it doesn't mean they don't want to hear from you, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't communicate. It just means you have to respect, where you fit on that priority list. And if you are one of those items that's really in demand, then you have a responsibility to step up and communicate all the time. So just understand that and make sure that you think about it. And also one of the things to think about is that the basket, the consumer basket, has changed drastically since the beginning of March. What people are buying right now and during this spike that they've seen is not what they were buying before that. So think if your product may have shifted in that priority list in the last little while. So for sure, the retailers are trying to get the stores looking like this again. And I'm not sure in the near term that we're going to see them look as full as this, but their focus is really on getting to an acceptable level of inventory in the stores and in the warehouse. And I think one of the things I would recommend when you are talking to your category people is just make sure you understand what is that level that they're looking for. If in the past they were looking for, say, 2 days worth of inventory on hand, what are they looking for now, so that you can start to understand the impact of those decisions on your business. So if they've changed, then you really need to know. And that's such a short-term priority for them, is just to keep the stores in stock and also to make sure that what's in the warehouse will backfill what they need. And I'm sure that everybody is struggling with understanding demand right now. We've seen huge spikes as announcements are made with regards to either tighter restrictions or different things going on with regards to the population. We know it impacts their demand for food. So it's trying to get a level of understanding of what that demand will be. So make sure you are talking to them about that and have those kind of conversations. And as we're in this period right now, I'd really encourage you to find solutions. It's so important to think through the options and come to them with solutions. And that's what they need right now. They need vendors who can, get those stores full, get those warehouses replenished so that they feel comfortable that they're in that in-stock position. Now, one thing to remember though is that these retailers, although they want solutions and they're expecting them, you have to remember that they are run by big, complicated systems. So there's certain things that have to be done to make an item, shipped through the warehouse to the store so that they can price it. And also, just from a supplier perspective, is you want to make sure it's set up properly so that they can pay you. So you just need to respect the fact that they still have these big complicated systems within their businesses. And yes, there's ways that they can try to override and do some things in an unprecedented situation. But just remember that when you bring solutions, think about how does it work in the system, not just a pallet of product, but how does it work in the system together. Now, when you're considering what you can do, I really would advise against just picking up your darts and throwing them at the dartboard and saying, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that. I appreciate that you want to provide some solutions, but it's important at this time when category managers and retailers are stretched to really bring solutions that are realistic to the table. So, maybe within your business, you need to throw some darts at the wall and try to figure it out, but you really, when you start to hone down what you're going to take to the customer, I would really encourage you to really not throw too many things at them at the beginning. So you need to make a plan, and that's so important in this era where we're struggling and we're trying to figure out the best solutions to things. So consider all the options, because when you make a plan, make sure that it's including all the different parts of your business, because there's no point in going to a retailer and saying, oh, I can get this amount of stock if your logistics people can't ship it, or if you don't have the lids for the packages or something like that. So really consider all aspects of your business when you're building that plan. And just, this is a time to double check to make sure that you have really considered all of it. So it's important to understand the challenges, and there's different challenges in your business than there were 2 weeks ago. So if you have hurdles to get over, then make sure that you consider them and make sure you capture them so that your customers understand some of the challenges that you're facing as well, because they need to know what you have in front of you. So if there's things coming up that weren't there 2 or 3 weeks ago, then just make sure that you note those, and that when you do communicate, that you'll be able to share them with them. And don't make any assumptions right now. I put the ad on the screen. So if I was working at a retailer right now, one of the things I would definitely be questioning is, should we be running ads where they're really challenged to get stock? And there's a big cost to ads. There's a complexity to running ads that is required for people to go in stores and change prices and change signage. And I think they're really trying to minimize the movement around the stores. They want to keep it in stock, but they don't want to be running and having to change signs and that kind of thing. So ask the question. I'm sure they're all considering whether to continue with ad programs in the short term. So ask the question. Also, if you have programs scheduled, if you have product that's scheduled to ship, I mean, we have a huge holiday, Easter, coming up, where it's going to be important to try to predict demand for Easter. We're going to have a lot more people staying home. I know in our family, we usually would gather with our whole family together, but obviously that's not going to happen this year. So we'll be home, 4 of us here, to have supper. So that's a different celebration or holiday occasion than it would have been in a previous year. So try to think through and talk to your customer about that. And if you had a big program shipping for Easter, you definitely need to make sure that it's still going to flow through the system and that kind of thing. So don't make any assumptions right now. And once you've figured out what you can do and what your plan is, and factoring in all the different things that are going on, and trust me, I appreciate it's changing daily. So you definitely need to keep an eye on every day. Then you need to communicate to your customers and be clear, be concise, and let them know what's going on in your business. And trust me, if I go back to my days at Loblaw, I would tell you I did want to know what was going on in your business. And I don't need pages and pages, but I do need to know so that I can communicate that to the people that I work with, and we can have a better appreciation for some of the challenges that you might be going through. So make sure you give them some good, clear, concise communication on what's happening. And then the last thing in the short term is just do it. You have to, be realistic about what you can accomplish and be the supplier who delivers right now. And this will pay dividends for you in the future. And, we don't know how long this is going to go on for, but we do know that at some point someone will figure out some solutions to this, and hopefully we'll get the world back to, I don't know whether I should use the word normal anymore, but maybe we'll get back an awful lot closer to where we were before. And when you deliver right now in these tough times, in these challenging times, that's when those relationships will pay dividends for you down the road. So put together a plan, figure out what the challenges are, how you can overcome them, communicate with your customer, and then deliver. And if you can do those things in the short term, your customers will appreciate it, and consumers will appreciate it as well, because they're concerned. I think everybody's concerned because of the uncertainty that we're facing right now. So if the next thing I just wanted to touch on was just ongoing communication, and this is a tough one because category managers are busy and buyers are busy, but on the flip side, we don't want to under communicate, because if we under communicate, then it's difficult for them to know what's going on in your business. So I think I would recommend that you probably, depending again where you sit on that priority list, if you're a top item in a category, you need to be giving them daily updates. And if you're an item that's important in the category, then I think you need to be giving them weekly updates. And don't expect an answer back. They've got a lot on their plate, but I do think that it's worth just a communication each week to just let them know where you're at, if you foresee any challenges on the horizon, what you're doing to overcome them, and also some of the constraints that you're working under, because in our food distribution system in Canada, where most of the retailers are centralized, they may not even know some of the challenges that you're working under in a different region of the country. And I think one of the things that within Canada, as we respond to this challenge, there's one of the difficulties is that we have different responses by province. So if you're a producer or processor in one province, the constraints or the challenges you're working under could be different than in another province. So just make sure they understand what you're working through and what you're trying to do to accomplish it. So I would recommend that. And I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't expect an answer, but keep them informed as to what's going on within your business, and make a distribution list within the retailer. I would suggest that if you're a top item, that probably the category manager and the director would be appropriate, and all the buyers. And then if you're kind of more a regular category type item, then I think you need to communicate with your category manager and your buyers. And then if requested, or maybe you want to ask if it needs to go to anybody else within the organization. But it's important, so important to communicate right now. So if we look to the future, and the reason I put this photo up was if you can see the butter there that's merchandised wrong on the shelf. And so this would have been a challenge 3 weeks ago. And one of the things that I would have been trying to help a client get resolved and figure out with the retailer. And now it just seems so insignificant and trivial. When I saw the photo, when I was going through putting together the presentation, I just had to put it in there because I just was thinking of what it was. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to things like product merchandise on its side as being a big problem, as opposed to what we're dealing with today. But let's just talk about the future for a few minutes, and where I see things going, and what you need to share with your customers. So the first thing you need to do is you do need to continue to communicate about your business. So you need to be looking at your business and understanding what are your capabilities, what can you do, what are you going to be challenged to do, and also how will you respond to this. And I think it's important that you have those conversations now, because although it's changing so fast and it's difficult to predict, it is important that you're assessing what your capabilities will be. So if you have levels of automation that allow you to do a certain number of things, then that's great. But just be really diligent about looking at your own business and trying to assess what you can and what you cannot do. Next thing I would really be looking at is labor. And we know that for some producers and processors, the temporary foreign worker program was a a lot of emails for a few days. You know, it's not going to happen. It might happen. It's not going to happen. It will happen. And here's how it's going to happen. And I think everybody's still trying to get questions answered. But please make sure that labor is something that you're focused on. And we're going to see a huge shift in the whole labor force, where we've got so many people out of work now with different industries shutting down, and we don't know how long that's going to be. But I know I'm in Atlantic Canada, and I know that the tourism industry this summer, I'm sure, will be devastated because people just will not be going anywhere. So there will be people who worked in that industry who could be available to work in the food industry. So there will be shifts. So I would encourage you to be thinking about that now and understanding the implications on your business. And I can tell you from my time working at Loblaw that I was so much more interested to learn about suppliers who were taking on these challenges. And one of the questions I used to often ask was about labor. And the way that the supplier answered that question told me a lot about their business. So if you're being proactive and you're going out and finding the right labor solutions to your business, then you want to share that with your customer, because they'll say, hey, you know, they're on their business, they're finding solutions to get me product, and I appreciate that. So I can tell you from my time on the retail side that it's something that's appreciated when people say, look, you know what, it's not easy, it's not a simple solution, it's not what it was last year, but we're working through it. So share those with them. Packaging is another thing that you really have to look at in your business. So supply chains are challenged. We know that where the virus started in China, that there were a lot of disruptions in supply of packaging and other things to any industry, really. So have a look at your suppliers, understand how long can you go with your current inventory. And I would also be exploring options. So are there options of domestic producers who can get you what you need in the short term, because we may see disruptions in some of those complicated supply chains for packaging. So have a look at what you have in stock. How long can you keep going with what you have? And then what are the solutions going forward? And similar to labor, I think you want to be communicating not the minute details with your customers, but just overall that, you know what, we used to source our bottles from Asia, and because of the disruptions, we're not sure we're going to get them. So we're going to shift to a different, whether it's a domestic producer or something like that, to try to be more more sure that you have the capability to produce and deliver your products. So you want to be on that. And one other thing, I know packaging costs money, and I'm not an expert at the programs that are being put forward to support business through these difficult times. But one thing you may want to consider is that they are making access to money easier. So perhaps in the past you didn't want to hold a lot of packaging inventory for the right reasons. But now if you do have access to some money to be able to get some more of that packaging inventory into your business, I would encourage you to explore some of those options. So ingredients and inputs. So this is some demi-glaze sauce that we were making in our house a few weeks ago. And, you know, I would always sort of be an advocate of finding the right ingredients, the right inputs to make your products. Same thing I would look at cooking in our house. I think you make a much better meal when you use great ingredients and the right inputs. So look at all that. It's, some of you may have great inventories and allow you to keep going. Other ones are going to be dependent on things coming in. So have a look at your ingredients and your inputs and look at every single one of them. And again, you might have to make some changes. And if it's not going to affect the end product, then I don't see any reason why you need to communicate that to your customer. But if you are going to be challenged with any of those, then again, you want to share some of those things with your customers. And other resources. I mean, the food industry is so complicated. We have such a tangled web of reliance on different industries, and trucking, logistics is a huge part of it. So you really want to understand the people that you've been using. Are they going to be there for you? And if you're And perhaps you own your own, which puts you in a different position because you know as long as you have a driver that you can do what you need to do. Or perhaps it's time to collaborate with some people and find some producers, processors that are close to you, where it would make sense to have the expense of a truck in this kind of time when it's going to probably become in shorter supply as things roll out. So it's something to consider, what all the other resources are that are required for you to produce your products and get them to market. And we're going to see impacts on borders and trade. We know that internationally, people are saying we're going to keep the borders open and we're going to have food move from one country to another. But I think we also have to be a little bit realistic about that. And if a major source of supply is coming from another country, then will it really get to us? Will there be people there to unload the container ship and some of those kind of things? And I think it's a balance between reality and trying to just look ahead and see what can happen. But just understand the impact that borders and trade will have on your ability to produce. And all these things make up that story that you need to communicate to your customer, because they do want to know and they need to know. And finally, when you look at all the different things I've been talking about, what impact does it have on your cost? And I did hear at the beginning of this where Galen Weston from Loblaw Companies made the announcement that no prices will increase. And I'm thinking, well, I applaud the initiative to remain calm, but I think we also have to understand that if inputs change or labor costs change, I know in some industries they're offering premiums to people right now to keep them coming to work. So there's a lot of things that can impact your product cost. And I would recommend that you really start to understand the impact on your costs, because of course it's always a negotiation with your retail customers. But if things are going to start to change, you need to give them a heads up and really help them understand what's happening and why it's happening. And on the flip side, the price of fuel has gone down. I mean, in our market, it's probably half of what it was not too long ago. So are your suppliers passing along that difference to you as well? So and if I was a retailer, if I was working as a category manager right now, I'd challenge you on that freight used to cost this much, now it costs that much. So you have to just stay on top of all the different things that are going into your product cost and try to understand if they're going to change and be ahead of that curve, because you can't just go in and say, well, it needs to be $12 or something, and then get into a conversation where they're not willing to accept that. So the more that you share ahead of time, the more realistic price changes can become, if in fact they need to change. So, and one last thing, just about as you manage through this in the sort of the near term, is you can't compromise food safety through all this. And I appreciate that it's even more challenging than it's ever been to do all these things and maintain that level of diligence that is expected in the market. But you really have to have it. It's just not negotiable. And unfortunately, from what I understand, that sort of that's where a lot of this started, was when some questionable practices were in place. And so we have to make sure that the food we produce is safe, and all the hard work that you're doing to get products produced and into the market could be really compromised if you had a food safety issue. So don't let it go. Make sure your people continue to understand how important it is, and really deliver on that aspect of your product, which is really part of your brand. So make sure you're still on those processes that you have within your business. Now, if I was to look at my crystal ball, which I appreciate that none of us really have, and I don't know too many people who predicted all of what was going to happen. And even if you went back a few weeks, if they would have predicted we'd be looking at what we're looking at now. So, but if I do try to take out my crystal ball and use my years of experience in the industry to tell you where it's going, here's what I think you should be considering. And the first thing is that I do believe there will be opportunities, and that's where I'm going to focus. We've talked a lot about some of the challenges, and you know what is required in your own business. So I'm going to focus on some of the opportunities and try and help you see what I see in front of us. So first of all, I think you need to focus on your existing customers. So have a look at the category where you compete. So if you're in the cheese category, and I appreciate you can't just make cheese in a week. But there's a lot of product that comes from Europe in that category. There's a lot of product that gets imported from the US. So have a look, see whether those supply chains are going to be disrupted, and see whether you can be a solution. And it's not just that the product might not be available, it might be the logistics of getting it here, all those kind of things. So perhaps you could be more of a solution for your existing customers. And it could be a new item, it could be an item that you've always been producing but not selling to them. So have a look, because they really do want to stay in stock. And if you look at the protein bar category, for example, and this is a picture from before all of this started, and if you look at that shelf, a huge percent of those products are made in the US. And there's a chance that some of those supply chains will be interrupted. So you, if you're in that category, probably have some opportunities to either add some additional SKUs or different things that you may have had in development that could be something that your customers would want right now to keep their shelves full, because they don't want to see it all empty. And local is another thing. I mean, we know that in certain stores that local has been getting more and more shelf space. And so it's something that I would expect we'll see more reliance on, just because the supply chain is so much different. So if you are a producer in that arena, I would suggest that there's going to be more opportunities for you. But be realistic with what you can do. And the other thing I would always go back to is that once you get to the shelf, you have to remember that you still got to sell. And it's one thing to fill a shelf, and the retailers are interested in that right now, but you still have to have that program in place to sell, and your product has to perform. So just remember that that's part of the equation still to be a successful supplier in the industry. So another thing for you to consider is online. You know, I think that before all this happened, online purchases of food in Canada were probably maybe between 3 and 5%. And now we know that the demand, I know people have been waiting, could be a week to, sort of lead time to order to get their product from the Loblaw stores in our market. So they're trying to manage this huge increase in demand. So what I'm telling you here is that consumers are going to be much more willing to buy food online. And a lot of them don't want to go out. And depending on how long all this continues, they may continue to be shy about going out. So online, if you can figure out, make sure that you have a good solid system in place to get paid, and also a good solid system in line for fulfillment. And if you can do that, you probably will have some good opportunities in our food industry. And another thing to consider right now is export. And I think when you watch the news, our neighbors to the south have a real mess on their hands, and they're going to be challenged. And it looks like it's going to go on for some period of time. And although you hear on the news, sometimes they believe the economy will get going in a few weeks, but I think that's maybe a bit of a dream. So you can look at some markets. It's complicated. You've got to make sure you've got a reliable partners down there and that kind of thing. But there could open up opportunities for you if you feel confident about the market that you can service. And there's a lot of people down there, or there are a lot of people down there. So it is definitely something to consider. Depending on where you operate in Canada, your access to the market. But it is something that we should be looking at in our food industry, assuming that we can meet the local demand, but it could be an opportunity to increase production. And another consideration would be co-packing. So if you have capacity and you have ability to produce products, and perhaps you go and you look at the category and you say, oh, that supplier is on the other side of the country, I could make that product and reduce some of the complexity of the supply chain. So I wouldn't be shy about looking or exploring some of those options where you could produce products for somebody else, which eliminates the need to get new listings and brands and all those kind of things, where you can just produce the product for them if it made financial sense for you to do that. So it's something to explore. It's not right for everybody, but it could be another option to give food producers, processors some increased volume during a time when there are going to be some opportunities as well as a lot of challenges in the marketplace. So that's basically what I see going on in the industry right now, I think that the reality is for all of us in the food industry is that how we operated a month ago is not how we're going to operate today. And if you think about some of the change and the fact that in the short term, I'd really encourage you to figure out what you can do, communicate, get commitments from your customers, and then take action and deliver and do what you say you're going to do. And then in the longer term, I think you need to keep your customers informed about what's going on within your business with regards to labor and packaging and food safety and inputs, ingredients, and your supply chain for different border crossing items. So keep them up to date on what's going on, communicate with them, and make sure you don't lose sight of your product cost during this challenging time. Really stay close to it. And then when we look to the future and say, will there be some opportunities? There could be opportunities for you to fulfill some demand in the category on items that you might not be supplying today to your existing customers, and also opportunities to perhaps export, or you could look at the co-packing option I talked about. So there are different things happening, but it is a time where we have to react and be nimble in the industry. So those were the different things that I wanted to share today, and trust that they really did make you think about your business and shed some light on how to deal with your retail customers. And also, I did want to make you aware that we're going to do another webinar next week. And I really see, I mean, I can't ship product and do those things from my office here, but I can try to share insights for people in the industry. So we're going to do another webinar next Wednesday. Same time. It's April Fool's, but it's not a joke. And we're going to do it about presenting to a category manager virtually. And I think this is something that all suppliers, producers, processors in the industry really need to understand and really embrace. And it's great when you can start to use the technology. And I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to share at least 5, and I'm hoping to get to 10 ideas for you to sample virtually. And think about how you're going to do that. If you're going to do a meeting on something like Zoom that we're using today to do the webinar, how are you going to sample your product? So I'm going to share at least 5, and I think I can get to 10 great ideas for you to do that when you're sitting in one province and the category manager sitting in another province. So we'll do that next week. But I trust that people are finding their way through this challenging situation, and every situation is different. And I do appreciate that it is a difficult time in the industry, and I appreciate all the work that everybody is doing to collaborate and try to find solutions through this. So I'm going to take some questions now. I think there's a couple of things here, so I'm just going to have a look and just address them. So the first one says, we're a startup company with frozen wood-fired pizza. Oh, one of my favorites. We've had some success with small, now looking into medium-sized grocery stores as our production capacity has grown. Question is how to approach the medium-sized markets in these troubling times. Well, I think the first thing I would do is make sure that you have your packaging and all the other things in place that they would expect from a food safety perspective and that kind of thing. So if you've had some success with some of the small stores, that's fantastic. So make sure you have the basics in terms of how your packaging will hold up in a big retail environment, and make sure you have your barcodes registered with GS1, and you would also need to go through ECCnet to make sure that your products are registered with them, so that the big retailers can get access to that information and get your products through their system. And then I would approach them, and it's a different time now. So if you don't know exactly who to go to, I would say it's probably a grocery product. You want to approach that category manager, and again, that could be a supply chain that's really challenged. So I would encourage you to take those steps first, and if you need some help, my email's on these. You can always shoot me a couple questions. I'm always happy to answer those for you. So those are the steps I'd be taking immediately. So also see a note from Norm. Thanks, Norm. Appreciate you being here, and also Crystal. Um, if there's any more questions, and I know in your market in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's one of the most complicated supply chains. Even when the rest of this isn't impacting us, it's sometimes challenging to get product across the water and across the island. So I often tell the story of when I worked at Loblaw, and we had our produce buyer in St. John's sent a note when we just couldn't get any product across Newfoundland to the warehouse, and the warehouse was empty. And he sent a note to the stores saying, please stop ordering. There's nothing here. We'll let you know when we get stock. And then at the bottom it said, P.S. If there's ever a chance to come back, I would not do it as a produce buyer on an island in the North Atlantic. So I always remember that from Doug. But if there's any specific things in Newfoundland and Labrador, then let me know. I'd be happy to help. And also just want to remind you too that we do have a webinar tomorrow with Perennia on how to prepare for a meeting with a category manager. So I'm looking forward to doing that with Emily Page from Perennia. And if you're looking to register for that, you can go to the Perennia website and the information is there, or even just Google Perennia webinar March 26th, and I believe you'll find it. So we'd be excited if you could be there tomorrow with us. I appreciate all the other comments, and it's great to have all of you here, and I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be here. And I'm just going to look and see. I do see another few questions, so I'm just going to maybe answer those. Do you think the big retailers will be issuing shortage late fines? I was thinking about that when I was putting together the presentation. I don't have an honest answer from one of them, but I think that's the kind of thing that you should be asking that question. And I think it's a totally fair question right now, because they want stock, and you're not being late or shorting on purpose. You're trying to get inventory to them. So I think that's a question that I would definitely ask. And if you need some help asking it, then just let me know. We can talk later. Another question, has the presentation been recorded? So yes, we did record it, and assuming the technology worked properly, we will have the recording available through SKUFood.com. And also another question about thoughts on food or grocery delivery, ensuring safety and consistency. So that's definitely a big issue, and I think something that's going to expand. And in the very short term, we see so much in terms of just trying to, I guess for lack of a better analogy, put our finger in the dike and trying to stop the flood. But I think that we need to set up more food related delivery, and I believe there's opportunities for collaboration on that with different producers and processors doing it, so that the people who are delivering food really understand what they're delivering, and maybe some of the unique qualities of delivering food and maintaining food safety and some of those kind of things. So I believe that as consumers are much more willing and interested in taking on sort of the extra or the premium for delivery, it's not for everybody, but for some, that we should look for more opportunities to collaborate in finding real food delivery as opposed to just sort of delivery companies. So then another question here about, can you comment on whether you believe there will be a fall down in purchasing once the crisis has passed? And yes, I do believe we're in for some kind of leveling out. But one thing I would point out is that with the food service industry really being decimated by this whole issue, and I know some restaurants are trying to stay open with takeout and delivery, but it has to be, just a fraction of what it was. So the numbers that I've been using are that the food service industry was probably 30% of the volume in Canada, which I think I've heard Al Archibald say that number before, compared to 50-50 in the US, but probably 70% retail, 30% food service in Canada. So if they're still doing 5% in food service, that means 25% of the volume is transferred to retail. And if you look at 25 on 70, which was their previous share, then you can calculate what increase we'll be seeing at retail, just as everybody is eating at home in the short term. So I definitely believe it will level out, but it will level out higher than where it was. Now we're going to see some kind of they're going to have to eat through what they have stockpiled. But I believe as the uncertainty maintains, people are going to probably want to keep some, perhaps 14 days worth on hand kind of thing in their own house. And then demand will level out based on that increase with no food service. And then I see another comment about once you've built up your panic supply of toilet paper, you'll work down your inventory over time and not repurchase. It's true. I did hear somebody comment, though, that perhaps with everybody working at home, where they used to go to an office, the home consumption of toilet paper will actually increase. Not quite as crazy as what we saw, but that consumption will increase. So it will. They probably can go through the stockpile a little quicker than they did. And that was crazy. I mean, it was a weird feeling. I was in stores on March 13th and saw that. And I'd be 100% honest with you. I looked at the aisle and there were about 6 packages left in the store I was in. And even though I knew we had some at home, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should buy it. It's just a weird feeling that consumers get. So anyway, it's hopefully we'll see the demand level out and our supply chain will be able to keep up in the short term. So, and the last question I see here is, do you think customers will lose brand loyalty when some things are missing from the shelves and they have to buy away from their regular brand, or will they return to their habits after stock is returned? So that's a great question. I would say that we've been experiencing in the food industry less brand loyalty as more millennials are sort of moving into the buying part of the populace. But I think that it's the way I would answer that question is I do believe people will try new things. And one of my contentions always is that in the grocery store, we've got so many great products that people never try or never even experience because we're creatures of habit. So I think that if you are a great brand and you have a temporary out of stock and you have a loyal following and people try new things, they will come back to you if you had great products and a great brand and a great relationship. If it wasn't that strong, or if it was easy for someone to substitute, then I would think you're going to lose volume through all this because people will try new things, they'll try new solutions, and you could lose them as a customer. Or on the flip side, if you're the person who filled the hole, then you're going to gain the market. So, there's another question about provide the link to register for the next one. We will send you an email if you registered for this webinar. We'll just send you a follow-up to say thanks for being here, and there will be a link to register for next week's webinar as well. So thanks for that question, appreciate it. And I'm just going to check and see if there's just anything else in the chat window here. I just have to go back and sort of find out where I was at here, sorry. And first of all, thank you for all the interaction. I think it's really great. I appreciate people's comments, and great to have the interaction with you, even though when you're on a webinar, it's kind of, I try not to make it all one way. So, so I had a question about the link. Let's see, here's Emily did put in the chat window there the link to register for the Perennial webinar. So I appreciate that, Emily, so people can see that there. Do you think retailers will be open to receiving proposals from new suppliers? So I think that my answer to that is if they're challenged for inventory, they will definitely be open to receiving proposals from new suppliers. Right now, they want to get those stores and warehouses back in shape. And if they look at a vendor who's going to be challenged, then yes, I believe they will be. And I think that I can tell you, I know, because I've been talking to people, and they will probably change some of the requirements for getting a listing and try to fast track things to get product on the store shelves. So they'll go to the existing supplier first, but if there's issues, then they want product. That's important to them. So here's a person who was selling to food service industry, and that's a big challenge for sure. Gourmet mushrooms and limited supply of packaging. So I think that in terms of trying to suggest where you would go with that, I think in the Newfoundland market, the first place I would go would be Coleman's, and that the store that they have in Mount Pearl is, I think it's Mount Pearl or Torbay Road, not Mount Pearl, I think it's Torbay Road. The new store that Coleman's opened might be an opportunity where you could sell some of those gourmet mushrooms. And I do know that the retailers have given the stores much more autonomy in the time right now to make decisions, to work with community groups, and also to work with vendors. So I would approach, if there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 stores in the right neighborhoods in the city where something like gourmet mushrooms is not for everybody, where you would have a chance to sell them, I would really look at that and see if they were willing to work with you on that, because you know you have product coming. Another question about the recording. So we will make that available to you, and also, if not, at SKUFood.com. Early to judge, but any input showing consumers want reduced prices due to economic downturn. And that's, again, a great question. I think that there will be pressure on prices because people are not going to be working at the level or at all. But it's very hard for food industry to react to that, because we know it's a pretty competitive industry before all this happened. So will there be, I think that there's going to be a big change in the shopping basket. I think consumers will trade very differently than they did before, especially in places really hit hard by employment issues. But I'm not sure. You may see some efforts on behalf of retailers to offer some, I'll call it sort of more basic items where they can try to do some things, but their primary objective right now will be trying to get inventory and figure out what the long-term demand will be, and operating very different stores in the near term. Another comment here, but crucial to make sure food safety protocol, clear evidence. So I do understand, and I think that everybody is learning about the virus right now in terms of, you know, how long it lasts and different things. So I agree that we all need to be diligent about that. And some more comments here. So appreciate people sharing their input here. It was great. Really appreciate that. I'm just looking to see. Yes, Torbay Road. Thank you, Crystal. I apologize. I've been in the store, and it's a great store. I think that if I lived in that neighborhood, I'd enjoy shopping there. So Torbay Road. And another question here about, are you hearing any slowdown shipping north-south into the US? So I have not heard that yet, but I think we're still in such early days of this that we have to keep watching every single day. And I don't believe that it's going to be a slowdown at the border, but probably the challenge will be logistics and resources with logistics. So I think that will be probably the biggest challenge. And only one request I'd make, Susan, if you're still on the line, if you could put that link into the question and answer section, and maybe you did, but I'll just take a look, because I did see a number of people asking for it, the link to register for next week. One other question, which again is a great one. You guys are all over this. I'm going to lose my job if all you keep asking these questions, because they're all great questions, which I should have answered for you. So what are your thoughts on tightening up credit terms to food service distributors? I think that's a very sensible thing to do in these tight times. I think that we all want to be fair and work with people. You understand who they are. But I think that you should explore it. And the reality is that a number of the financial packages, aid packages, are making it available for companies to access money so that they can pay their bills. So I think that you want to be encouraging your suppliers to do that, and you have to get paid for what you are delivering to them. So although, you know, I think that it's great, the collaboration we've seen from industry to work together, but we do also have to make sure that we're protecting the accounts receivable that you have in your business. So I think I would definitely encourage you to look at that, and encourage them to go get access to some of that so that they can continue to keep their business running. It's a tough question, because we do want to work together, but it's also important to be paid for what you do in the marketplace that we work with. So I think I've answered all the questions. I'm just going to look through the chat one more time just to see if I've missed anything, but I really appreciate everybody staying with us through the session today. I trust you found it worthwhile. And if you do have any questions, my phone number is usually on everything, but it's 902-489 Was it 90? I can't even remember my phone number. That's how much time has, how much things are going nuts around here these days. So 902-489-2900 is my phone number, or you can send me an email, peter@skufood.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions and help you work through the challenges that so many of you are facing. And thank you, Susan. I see the link for next week. So if people want to access that, you can do it right here while you're here. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to talking with lots of you soon. Thanks.